back to Beyond Well with Sheila Hamilton. I'm here with Dr. Jenna Lejeune. Hi, Jenna.
Hello.
And sadly, Brian is in his second week of chickenpox.
Can you believe it?
Yeah, all over his. I accidentally FaceTime and he answered with a pillow up underneath his eyes.
Oh my gosh. I
Yeah.
just feel like that's so not right. You should be getting chickenpox when you're 12 and you
I know.
want to stay home from school.
That's
and
right.
B, get to eat ice cream all day.
Yeah, no kidding. So we will welcome him back next week and really, really send him lots of our love and healing wishes. But in the meantime, just a reminder that this is a program for people who want to talk about their interior lives. And I don't think there's any guest who better represents what we're about than Kathleen Lane. She lives in Portland, where she writes, teaches, and co-hosts the art and literary event series Share. She's also the founder of Create More, Fear Less. Hi.
Hey, Sheila.
I am so glad to know that you are a good friend of Courtney Haumeister,
I am.
who also is a big anxiety sufferer.
Yes, and in fact, she's on our advisory council, so she's been very involved in this work.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
I want to start because I always think it's interesting how people describe themselves. You first describe yourself as a writer, but you're a writer with a lot of anxiety.
I am.
So could we talk about when your own anxiety showed up for you?
When in my life? I think, I probably from the beginning, but my relationship to my anxiety changed over time.
Yeah.
And I would say not for the better. When I was young, I just had one of those dark imaginations, and it just happened really kind of organically. The thoughts came and they went. I didn't get too attached to them. I definitely didn't feel any shame around my way of thinking. So, if anything, it was born out of my imagination, definitely out of the fear that I felt, in different circumstances.
Yeah.
But, I wouldn't have called it this at the time, but now I can see that it was just my story-making mind, right?
How interesting. Did either of you hear This American Life this weekend?
Oh, no, I missed
It
it.
is a special
No.
episode, and Michael Barbaro, who I love, talks to a 9-year-old girl about her anxiety, which was coupled with intrusive thoughts and OCD. And it was so fascinating for me as a person who loves language to listen to how a 9-year-old explains the experience of having anxiety. It blew me away because
I need to hear that.
she was so verbal, and yet she was really clear about how it would happen, that she knew that if she saw someone who was vomiting, she was going to vomit, she was going to vomit, and she would say the words again and again. Did you have that kind of intrusive thinking?
I did. Again, I didn't have any worry around it. I think this was pre-diagnosis in a way.
Yeah.
I didn't have... my parents weren't looking at it as a mental illness. I
Yeah.
don't think they were even aware of what was happening inside me. I think that's part of it, is that, it's a very, it's kind of a lonely experience, anxiety.
Yeah.
It's you and your mind. So yeah, I did have these repetitive thoughts, and then I had my ways of comforting myself through them,
Let's talk about those. What were they?
I was, repetitive. I had my mantras. So
Yeah.
much like Maggie in the book, I would repeat. Often when I had a negative thought, I would try to, unthink it
Yeah.
by having a
I will not
positive-
throw up. I
Right.
will not throw
Right,
up.
right.
Got it.
Yeah.
Wow,
And I
fascinating.
also had a special fondness for even numbers.
Oh, that's
and
so awesome.
So if I skipped once, I felt the need to skip twice. If my arm brushed up against something, I had to brush my other arm. So it was that evenness, that keeping myself feeling, balanced. It's
And-
kind of that finding some way of controlling your environment when your environment feels out of control.
I just love it. And also that feeling of control, right?
Right.
And nobody as a 9-year-old knows that, hey, we all want a feeling of control, right? You don't even have that language. So
Right. I mean, and part of the message of this program is, flipping the dialogue a little bit. So, if you look at kids, obviously we look at that as OCD, something that needs to be treated, fixed. You can also reframe it as, here's a kid who has figured out for themselves what I need to feel whole and safe.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So the point of the broadcast yesterday was that so many kids actually get so paralyzed that they stop being able to move, to go to school, to have those things. Jenna, how do you feel about this? It's like a repetitive practice and an exposure therapy where they take the kids in and they actually make them do their worst fear again and again and again and again.
Well, the only word that I don't like in what you just said is make.
Okay.
Because what's really, really important is not that you're like either forcing yourself. I often talk about it as like white knuckling. You don't want to like white knuckle your way through anxiety.
Yeah.
Because you're just sort of, again, reinforcing this idea that, oh, this is scary, this is bad, I got to fight against this.
Right.
So in ACT, we use the word willingness.
Yeah.
And that's this idea of, would you be willing to face the thing that you are most fearful of, because there's something more important to you than the thing you're fearful of. And Kathleen, I hope it's okay if I mention this,
Please.
but you were saying that when you were going to come on this morning, you were saying that you were sort of feeling anxious about coming on. And I had exactly the same feeling when I first started doing the podcast. In fact, when I first got asked, I said, hell no. Like, I'm an introverted person. There's no way. But the idea is that you said, oh, I'm willing to do this.
Right.
Because there's something important here for me that's even more important to me than the fear. And so that's what just a little reframe, but I do think a very important one for kids or adults.
And so going on with your own story, Kathleen, when did your anxiety start to become a problem? Like, because when you're a kid, you're just using these coping mechanisms, you're dealing with it. At what point in your life did you see it as like, oh, I actually need some help to cope with this?
Right. Well, ironically, I would say when the book came out.
Oh, is that right? Oh, speaking of, she probably is not going to give it the plug it deserves, but it is one of the most charming children's books I've ever read, and I think you so encapsulate the experience of kids who are fearful in such a beautiful and poignant way. It's called The Best Worst Thing, and I was reading the reviews by librarians. They love this book in public libraries.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So when did my anxiety really show up? This book I never really set out to write. It originally was a short story in a short story collection that I was developing, and my agent said, it's narrated by a young girl. Maybe you should consider this, explore it as a middle grade. And I said yes, but inside I was screaming no. I wasn't that interested in writing a middle grade at the time.
Yeah.
And I really didn't consider this. So I didn't set out to write a story about a young girl with anxiety, and I certainly didn't see it as my story. I was pretty detached from it because as a short story, it was actually more focused on the father and his need to be a hero or seen as a hero by his family. So it wasn't until I was pretty far into the book, just exploring the possibility of it as a middle grade, that I thought, oh, wait a minute. This is sort of familiar. I have a lot in common with this young girl who's narrating this book.
Yeah.
The mind can sneak up on you like that.
It really can. I mean, I'm so grateful to the book now. I will say that putting the book out into the world was kind of a painful experience for me. I was caught up in my own failings around the book. And, I had all kinds of, anxiety stories that were spinning around in my brain. And then, accompanied by the shame spin of why can't I get over this? I'm out representing this book. I've said in the book that we need to let go of the things that we can't control. And I am not letting go of those things myself. And I am being invited into classrooms to share my wisdom that I hadn't yet gathered.
Don't you think, though, that part of the way that kids love you is when you say, look, I also have this, and I also struggle with these things. And every day I'm looking for ways that I can manage my anxiety.
1,000%.
Like somehow then you become the superhero to them.
I think that is the message, or
Yeah.
they become the superhero to themselves. I mean,
Right.
we're sitting in a circle. We're all at the same level. We're all, I mean, we start every session with the ritual of writing our worry on a stone and sharing that with each other. Just this practice of our thoughts are separate from us. We have control over them. We get to decide what to do with these worries of ours. Are we going to hold on to them? Are we going to set them aside? Are we going to share them with our friend? I'm in it with them. I'm sharing what's going on with me that day. They're seeing that. We're seeing through the process of being together week after week that those worries don't stay with us. Some of them do, and that's okay too. But we can move on. We can laugh. We can engage in other parts of our day and lives, and those worries don't have to take up as much space.
It's so beautiful, and it's part of my big dream. When I started doing this 10 years ago, I was so hopeful that there was going to be someone who would develop a curriculum that was all about emotional intelligence, and that people would hire tutors both for the mind as they would hire for their kids' SAT prep.
Right.
And it sounds like you did it.
Well, it's funny you say that, because my next idea, I mean, this is, an unrealistic one, but I think that we should devote 6th grade to mental and emotional wellness.
So smart.
Right?
Absolutely.
An entire curriculum built around just getting our insides in order so that we can manage life and, carry some inner power with us.
And what a perfect time to do it, at that time of transition.
Absolutely.
It's getting really tough for them. They're so much more identified with how people see them rather than just living in their own creative being, right?
And we've we started out with 6th graders, and that's our main focus right now, just because of that. It's when kids are leaving that, innocent cocoon of their childhood. They're beginning to, see the world, this expanded view of the world and all that carries with it. So, there's so much out there that's troubling for kids that they have to somehow fold into their understanding of the world. They don't yet have maybe the maturity or the the perspective, maybe.
Yeah. And even and the language, that's what I keep finding is that even as adults, we've grown up without the language to describe our interior.
Yes.
Right.
We can't really detect what the difference is between obsessiveness and anxiety. Like, what is the difference, and is there, and who can tell me whether one is normal and one is not?
And part of what I love about how you're speaking about this, Kathleen, is that I think right now in our culture there is a lot of discussion about we have to have more mental health treatment. We have to treat the mentally ill people. And what I love about what you're saying is, or this is just like a function of having a human mind, and we might need to learn some skills for living with this human mind that can give us things like worries or anxieties or, all these other sticky thoughts. And so it's this very kind of normalizing, just like you would kind of learn how to deal with any other part of being a human, rather than, oh, if you're struggling, that means you're sick or ill and you need to get treated, and then you'll be back to where the rest of us are.
Right. I think that's the bigger problem, is this extra layer of shame that kids are walking around thinking that there's something wrong with them.
Right.
When they're having a pretty normal reaction to this world.
Yeah.
I mean, this world is a little crazy right now.
Absolutely.
In addition to everything that we, took on as middle schoolers, just the social and academic pressure and everything else that goes along with being a middle grader. I mean, they're dealing with the possibility that somebody could walk into their school with a gun.
Yeah. Right.
They're very aware of what's going on in the news. They're carrying around their news source in their pocket, along with an up to date, status report and how they're doing socially.
Right.
So it's so much. So it is normal what they're feeling. So I really want to change the conversation from what's wrong with our kids to what's right with our kids.
Yes.
So awesome.
And what's right with them is that they're, first of all, they're in touch. They're aware of what's going on in the world. They're sensitive to it.
Yeah.
So highlighting the flip side of what we would normally see as, cause for concern or mental, treatment.
Well, you're normalizing the experience of growing up in a very, very complicated world,
Right.
And what I want to talk about, if we could, you create this place for anyone to share their fears. When they come in, how open are they in the beginning with doing this? Does it take a little while and a little trust building for you to get there?
It takes about 2 seconds. It honestly does.
Awesome.
That was I wondered the same thing,
of
course, before session 1. But, the kids were very open about what they were feeling and very receptive to what everybody else in the group shared. And, just showed a lot of empathy for each other. And it was a beautiful thing. The spirit of the groups, I would say, is very joyful.
Wow.
You wouldn't expect that.
Yeah.
I think that's so awesome. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about how you use it, because I went through for each of the different projects and it's a combination of written projects, it's a combination of artistic projects, and some of it is actually, it looks like it's hand building, like you're trying to get them to engage their hands. First of all, is there a theory behind all of this? Did you work with psychiatrists, psychologists, or did you just create this?
Just created. It was a creative exercise, and this is a message that I think is worth sharing with kids. How can I present that in a way where it's tactile, where they're, engaging with it, where they're feeling it more than thinking it?
Yeah. So when you talk about worry is just courage waiting to get out. Worry is your body telling you that you're about to try something new, which can feel uncomfortable. Without fear, though, courage would not exist. So next time you feel nervous or anxious, take a deep breath and go for it. Trust us, afterwards you'll feel much less like a worrier and more like a warrior. Beautiful. So you've integrated your writing, and then what is the experience that they're using in that time for this exercise? What are they doing to engage in this as well?
It's a process of, first opening a dialogue around whatever, in this case, re-seeing or changing their point of view about themselves. So in this case, we've shared our worries, we've expressed those with each other, but, oh, look, we're here. We showed up to this day. We showed up to these relationships that we're worried about. So, just moving them into a new place, a new understanding of what's going on for them, something else to hold on to besides, I'm fearful. And then, engaging in a creative project that really allows them to express that in an artistic way. So,
could you read some of the responses that you brought in from when you asked them to describe?
Sure.
Yeah, I would love that.
I don't know if I brought a few copies, so I don't know if we'd want to go 1, 2, 3.
Sure.
So you can hear the separation of voice.
Oh.
So
Yeah, I love that.
This is an exercise called Capture the Feeling. We talk about how, anxiety is one word that doesn't really speak to our individual experiences. So, beyond that, what is my own personal relationship with anxiety? What's going on in my mind and body? How does it feel to me?
Yeah.
And then how do I work with that feeling? So the first part of the exercise is just going through a series of creative prompts that help them to identify a metaphor.
Oh, that's so great.
And then working with that same metaphor, the second part of the exercise is, okay, when I'm caught up in that feeling, what can I remember? What will help me to get through it? So I've, each one that we'll read is a different response from a
Okay.
different student. And then at the end, I added some of their advice to themselves separately.
Beautiful.
So
I might not be able to make it through it without crying.
I know.
I'm so excited.
yeah.
Okay,
and
so-
remember, these are sixth graders.
know.
That's
Oh
just
my gosh.
So beautiful.
Oh,
so maybe you should start. What do you
okay.
think?
I'll be
Okay.
blue.
And then we'll go.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Worry is like an angry bull in my brain.
Like a bear that won't stop clawing me.
Like butterflies starting to fly in my stomach.
Worry feels like a tornado that won't go away.
Like a snake is pressing my insides so hard and it won't let go of me.
Like my head is a doorstop trying to stop something bigger than me.
Worry is like the stomp of a giant.
Like bees in my head.
Like an itch I can never scratch.
It's like I'm in a race so close to the finish line, but there's a rope pulling me backward into a black cloud full of fears and darkness.
It's like there's a thought stuck in the back of my brain with super glue. And the harder I try to pull it off, the harder it sticks.
Worry is like gunshots in my head.
Like an alarm clock.
Like crashing plates.
Like a tracker jacker.
It's like being trapped in a box.
Like I'm in a long, dark tunnel and the only way out is through a sea of trouble.
Like I am on a journey across mountains that reach across the sky. Like clouds greedily searching for another moon.
But I know I will get over the mountain.
But I know that the light will come out.
But I know I'll be out of plates soon.
But I know the butterflies will fly away.
But I know the clouds will soon clear and I can get back to the race.
Oh my gosh.
You need that. You need to get this published.
Beautiful, right?
Oh my
incredible.
gosh. Oh,
Jenna,
it's amazing.
How does the inherent beauty and knowing of what these kids are doing dovetail with what you're doing in your practice?
Yeah, I feel I was thinking here, like when people ask me what ACT is, I would like you to describe what you do and say, so that's kind of ACT at its very, very best. So some of the things that you're talking about here are being able to look at thoughts rather than from thoughts. So being able to kind of see them and objectify them and even have some beauty to them or some kind of haunting creativity, that's a very different thing than kind of just being caught up in the worry thought. So in ACT, we call that diffusion. And then we talk about perspective taking in ACT and being able to shift perspective. So you said by sharing these worry rocks or sharing other people's stories, you can kind of see, oh, that's a thought that Sheila has. And Sheila is like this amazing person and she has those anxious thoughts.
Oh, you should have seen me this morning.
So by being able to kind of take the other's perspective, you can ask yourself, oh, how would I want to respond to myself, given that that's how I would want to respond to Sheila?
Yeah.
And then this piece about values, what's most important to you, and committed action, actually doing something that is in the service of what's most important to you is exactly what you're talking about here. So, I mean, it's just so fantastic. And I'm so glad you didn't talk to psychologists or psychiatrists when you were developing this, because you have like the intuitive, this is what sort of is needed. And we probably would have screwed you up had you talked to us.
Well, you know what? I did. After I had, put the website together and created some projects, I did meet with the clinical director at the Northwest Anxiety Institute to say, hey, how's this thing?
Super.
And I made a couple of adjustments.
Super.
That, he had some insights that were helpful.
Oh, that's great.
And I'm now teaching creative workshops there with
Oh
with
my
the clients.
Oh, that is so cool.
So that's been really meaningful.
Oh my gosh.
So I
That's
promised
so
you I wasn't
exciting.
going to try to get into your bureaucratic business, but I find that public schools in particular are really slow to deal with. They're really resistant to change. So how did you convince the public schools to adopt this curriculum?
Well, the first round, I got a grant from the Regional Arts and Culture Council.
So a little
that
bit
made
hoof
it
behind it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
hoof. Right. So we had the endorsement of the Regional Arts Council, and we had an offering that was free. So that was an easy way in. And, found 3 very supportive counselors. Counselors, they're so overwhelmed.
Yeah.
They don't really, they want more programs, but they don't want more programs. I mean, it's a lot for them to manage. They have, the ratio right now is 1 counselor to 450 students.
Oh my
So
gosh.
they're putting out fires all day.
Absolutely.
They don't have time for this, small group work. So to have somebody come in from the outside and offer it, great. But I think the long-term vision and what I'm most excited about right now is how counselors are taking it on themselves. And, the intention is to get this out there in a way that's easy for others to implement.
Yeah, that makes so much sense.
Counselors, one counselor in meeting with her, I said, what do you really need for this to be something that would be valuable to you, for you to actually adopt it? And she said, I need it to be grab and go.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's what I've been working toward. How can all the projects be written in a way that they can just pick them up and 10 minutes later be in a group with students.
Yeah, The website itself is fascinating because it's create more, fear less, but it's create more, fearless.
Right.
So did you have a preference for how people read it?
No.
You don't. 'Cause either work.
Yeah.
Either work.
Right.
But I was really amazed that even as you're not a visual artist and you probably aren't a handyman, but you have handyman type experiments on there, like building the light box.
Oh,
Why?
right.
Why did you feel the need to have both hand interest as well as mind interest?
That's a good question. I guess I didn't set out with that intention. That was a project that grew out of, all of them sort of grew out of an idea. And then how do I take that idea and turn it into a creative project?
Yeah.
In that case, it was this idea of, shining the light on what gifts you have inside you, right?
Yeah.
These things that we overlook when we're so caught up in our anxiety. So
it's interesting because I thought it was a reflection of, my daughter went through the Montessori system, and their belief was always, if you can have the child busy with their hands, it frees up the ability to do all of the other work, really. And I was like, I wonder if that's a Montessori type thought there, the building of the box, and then the same time talking about your own light and your own source of inspiration.
Right.
Well, a way that I might see that as well is having these physical objects actually serve as a metaphor. And as soon as you're starting to work in metaphor, either like a physical metaphor or kind of a verbal metaphor, the thoughts take on they have a different quality, right? Now they're like this object that you can kind of play with and manipulate and see from different perspectives. And that's why metaphor, either a physical doing or a verbal metaphor, is so helpful when it comes to anxiety.
Yeah, I think that's right. Getting out of our minds,
exactly.
Right? Somewhere to put all that swirling energy
exactly.
that we have.
So I was, I often find myself in mental health conversations these days. Of course, I don't know why. But I'm on the trail and I run into an old friend, and her daughter in 5th grade started suffering from extreme anxiety, paralyzing anxiety. And when she attempted to get counseling, the counselor was overwhelmed and said, I have 40 girls like this. And let me tell you, all of them are like your daughter, super smart, really perfectionistic, incredibly driven. You have one of your angles in your program that says, high perfectionists, come on in. Why do you speak to that group in particular?
That came up at the Northwest Anxiety Institute. There were, the 2 that I was working with at the time, they were dealing with crippling perfectionism, and that's something that I related to. And so, we decided we need to take this on.
Wow.
So the next week we set out to make the worst art we could possibly make.
Oh my God.
That was our challenge. And it was really interesting because all of us, every time it was a mess, you could see us trying to kind of correct,
That is so amazing.
And then the rule was, if it starts to look too good, you have to do something to destroy it again. So we had these layered, this artwork that was like dimensional in the end. It had, had, clay stuck on it and garbage. And, it was just a mess. We were dripping paint, and it was so satisfying, And then part of it, it is exposure therapy at the Northwest Anxiety Institute. So the second part was signing our names to it and then proudly showing it to the other clinicians.
Oh my God. See, okay, I think that goes back to something you said at the very beginning, that you are somebody that has probably run on the more anxious side most of your life. And then at some point, what got added to that was some dirty suffering around, and I shouldn't be like this, and there's something wrong with me, and all of this shame. And so here, kind of what you're doing in this art, kind of the perfectionism project there, is you're sort of saying, okay, well, I'm still going to have the anxiety, but fuck you to the to the shame and all of the other dirty suffering that society has kind of put on top of it. And when it is only anxiety, I don't mean to minimize it. Like, I hate feeling anxious too, but it is different than having anxious thoughts and all this shame and hiding and, oh my God, I'm supposed to be able to get over this kind of thing.
Yeah.
There's something wrong with me.
Right.
So I love the playful attitude about it.
Well, there's a second, if I can go back to something you said earlier when you were talking about this idea that everybody else has their together.
Right.
You were talking about Sheila,
Right.
and her, like,
The
why
biggest,
is she so together?
The biggest mess I know.
Right.
Mwah.
Right.
Yeah.
Why is Sheila so perfect? And I'm, having such a hard time with my anxiety. And I think that's a big, that's a concern right now when you have, kids at such young ages working on their brands. They're creating these personas online that that would have others, assuming that everything is just
perfect.
grand in their lives. So
not only that, but then they're comparing themselves to other fifth graders who have brand managers, who have professional photographers, and that's the standard.
Yeah.
Well, they're comparing their insides to other people's outsides.
That's a great way to put it,
not a fair comparison.
Really good way to put it.
Right, and we're showing about this much.
Right, exactly.
A fraction of our pinky to each other because,
exactly.
You've probably heard the statistic how many thoughts we have in a day.
Yeah.
50 to 70,000 thoughts every day.
Right.
And, when I ask students to guess, first of all, they say everything from 2 to, millions, depending on their age. So that always falls a little flat. But the point is, we have these 70,000 thoughts, and we're only showing so few of them. And so, I think revealing more of the muck, the mess, is really important for kids to see that in each other.
Here. Okay, I'm going to plug you one more time because I can tell you're not a person who will go, hold on, I'm going to plug my book and I'm going to plug my website.
Oh, boy.
I really want especially counselors and school teachers who might be interested in adopting this program to check it out at createmorefearless.org and to ask your librarian about The Order of the Best Worst Thing by Kathleen Lane. Worry is courage just waiting to get out. Thanks for your courage for being here today, Kathleen.
Thank you for having me.
And how do we help grow this program? What can we do?
Oh, thanks for that question. What you're doing right now,
Thank
of
you.
all, and thank you for your own advocacy around mental illness, both of you. Just spreading the word as you're doing. That's so helpful. I think anytime we can flip the language in our conversations with kids and with parents and teachers and counselors and, highlight the gifts that come along with the anxious mind. I forgot to say, I love to ask kids, what good has anxiety brought to your lives? And they're always of course, initially stumped by that question, but then the list is pretty long.
Absolutely.
I'm here because of my anxiety. I wrote this book because of my anxiety. This program was born out of anxiety. And, they're just helping kids to see that they have this creative power source inside them. And if they can use that power source to create fears and worries, they can also use that power source to change the story, and write new stories.
Just to circle back to the amazing interview, I hope you all take time to listen to it. With the Daily, he asked her, she was sitting in her bedroom, and he asked her to name the things in her bedroom that really meant a lot to her and that were in that room because of her anxiety. And she looked around and she said, well, all these people. And I was like, oh, wow. She didn't name her things. She didn't name getting a medication that helped her. She didn't name anything. She named the people who helped her communicate what she was going through.
Wow.
I hope you check out that, because I'm all about really, really compelling radio and communication. And that is one of the most beautifully emotional shows I've ever listened to.
Right.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I also want to plug Kathleen's website. You should have seen me yesterday in the coffee shop. I'm sitting there, tears are coming down my face. I keep bugging my partner. No, but just one more. You got to hear this thing. You got to hear this thing. It was so beautiful and inspiring, both to see the work that you're doing, and then also to see, like, you have all these fantastic, amazing quotes by these kids. Like, my God, there's so much wisdom there. It's unbelievable.
Right. Yeah.
So if you want some inspiration and just some amazing creative kind of wonderful examples, go to Kathleen's website.
Yeah,
It's
create
really
more,
Thank you for that.
fearless.org.
Yeah.
Our show is brought to us by the Foundation for Excellence in Mental Health Care. And if you're supporting what we're doing here today, just click on the link and you can make a donation and become a sustaining member. Thanks again for being with us.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thank
Sheila.
you.
Thank you.